So there's been a lot of talk this year about the pressure on Jack Doohan, of course, at Alpine, all the pressure that he's going to be replaced, etc., etc. And of course, now he has been replaced, but the pressures on young drivers, new drivers in Formula 1 is nothing new. And one of Formula 1's older drivers now, at least a former driver anyway, Kevin Magnussen, obviously leaving the sport after last year. Now he's going and racing in endurance racing for BMW. And obviously he was in Formula 1 for a very long time. Now, he's probably most associated with the Haas Formula 1 team. After all, he raced for them between, 2018 to 2024 on and off, something like that. A lot of years there, but he actually got his debut back in the day for McLaren in 2014. He got a podium on his debut as well, second place after Daniel Ricciardo's disqualification at the 2014 Australian Grand Prix. Now, I remember that, Kevin Magnussen, I did follow his kind of junior career as well. He was in Formula Renault 3.5, I think, in 2013. And he was very much, he was being talked about as the next Lewis Hamilton. Like, genuinely, like, people were like, this Magnussen kid is an incredible driver. He absolutely dominated the championship. And yes, he had an incredible debut, but after that, the experience and the talent of Jenson Button, his teammate at McLaren, very much showed. And quite frankly, he wasn't, I wouldn't go as far as to say he was outclassed by Button, but he was resoundingly beaten by Button, which, again, given the experience of Button, a former world champion in 2009, well regarded as being one of the best wet weather drivers in particular of his generation, without a doubt. The pressure on him was very much mounting, and he was ousted in 2015. Fernando Alonso coming into the team, and maybe that was a good thing for Kevin Magnussen's career, in fairness, because McLaren were absolutely dog doo-doo in 2015 with that Honda partnership. As Magnussen found out in Australia that year, he didn't even make the start of the race when he super subbed in because his engine blew up on the formation lap. But anyway, Magnussen has been speaking in the media, and I think this is a really interesting interview here on the F1 Chronicle.com. He's talking about McLaren and their disrespectful expectations back in 2014. Now, I am sure this is not unique to McLaren. I think it's the first time we've really heard about McLaren putting this kind of pressure on its drivers. We always talk about Red Bull. We always talk about Alpine now as well, with the pressure on drivers for those teams. But McLaren really haven't been spoken about in that way, I don't think. We've not really heard many complaints from the likes of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri when they were in their rookie seasons about pressure. So perhaps things have changed under Zach Brown. I hope they have. But back in Kevin Magnussen's day, when was it Ron Dennis who was in charge then? I know he came back for a bit. I think it was Dennis, wasn't it? But anyway, long intro. Let's get into what's been said here, guys. Full article on the F1Chronicle.com, as always. Kevin Magnussen has opened up about the immense pressure he faced during his rookie Formula 1 season with McLaren in 2014, describing the team's demands as disrespectful. The Dane revealed that McLaren expected him to match the performance of Lewis Hamilton, who was already an established multiple-time world champion. Magnussen entered Formula 1 in 2014, replacing Sergio Perez, and made an immediate impression by finishing third in his debut race at the Australian Grand Prix. He qualified fourth and crossed the line ahead of Hamilton before being promoted to second following Daniel Ricciardo's disqualification. Just a little thing to add to that, Hamilton retired from that race due to an engine failure, so a lot of people crossed the line ahead of Hamilton because Hamilton didn't cross the line. Despite scoring 11 additional points throughout the season, Magnussen was demoted to reserve driver the following year and replaced by Fernando Alonso, eventually leaving the team at the end of 2015 to join Renault. Reflecting on his time at McLaren, Magnussen said, "I remember Jonathan Neal, managing director, and Eric Boulier." It was Eric Boulier back then. I forgot he was at McLaren. God, there was dark times to be a McLaren fan. I've kind of blocked a lot of the negative memories out of my kind of a recollection there. Eric was telling me Lewis was an average of 0.15 seconds faster than Jenson in qualifying over 3 years. They raced alongside each other. So to retain your drive for next year, you should be aiming to beat Jenson by the same margin. What? This is a rookie. Button's a world champion. That ain't fair. He added, "I accepted it at the time, but looking back, it was unfair." Yeah, K-Mag, absolutely. Lewis and Jenson were both F1 world champions, far more experienced than I was, and Jonathan and Eric were telling me that if I wasn't good in my rookie season as Lewis had been in his third and fourth F1 season... Wait, they're saying... So what seasons are those for Lewis? So those would have been 2011 and 2012. No, third and fourth, so 2010 and 2011. They were saying that Magnussen, in his rookie season, should have been as fast as Lewis Hamilton in his third and fourth. By that time, he was already a world champion. That is absolute insanity. It is no surprise that Eric Boullier did not last long at that team. That is horrible. That is more than disrespectful. That is insanity. That I'd be out. That was crazy. And also disrespectful to Jenson. Yeah, absolutely. I get you want to motivate your drivers, but that's just delusion. There's setting aspirational targets, then there's delusion. That's delusion. Magnussen had Jenson Button, the 2009 world champion, as his teammate, while Hamilton also won a title with McLaren in 2008. The expectation placed on the young Dane were immense, especially given his relative inexperience. Now competing in the FIA World Endurance Championship, Magnussen reflects on how he might have handled the situation differently. Now I wish I stood up for myself, he admitted, but I was naive. But in my defence, I was an F1 new boy. Look, he was the victim in that situation. He should not be blaming himself. You should be as a young man in general, not just in the workplace, but in life. You should be able to trust your elders. You should be able to seek advice from them. They're more experienced in life, more experienced in the workplace, so they should be guiding you, not putting that. I mean, we talk about Red Bull putting insane expectations. McLaren with K-Mag, wow. Inevitably, that unfair weight of expectation heaped unnecessary pressure on me, and I began to make mistakes. It was a ridiculous set of expectations to push on a 21-year-old rookie. I had the talent, I had the speed, but I needed support mentally and emotionally, and the senior McLaren management on the racing side offered the opposite. Magnussen's experience highlights how challenging it is for young drivers to meet the loftier standards set by legends like Hamilton, who is now a 7-time world champion, tied with Michael Schumacher. Yeah, I mean, it ain't Lewis's fault, but wow, I mean, I'm very glad. I don't know what Eric Boullier is doing these days, but stay out of F1 forever. If that's what you're doing, unless you're going to learn from those mistakes you made, because those are mistakes on their part. Jonathan Neal as well, of course, going through that. I mean, I am genuinely blown away by that. Yeah, Magnussen was a decent driver. Personally, I mean, I might not stick with this now, but I said at the start of the season I thought the Haas should have retained him for this year. I do, maybe not now with how Ocon's doing. I think Ocon's doing really well. Maybe Magnussen will do better, maybe not. We'll never know. But I said at the time I thought that Magnussen should have been retained by Haas. I think he's a tidy Formula 1 driver. But yeah, to put that kind of pressure. I mean, were they doing the same thing with Stoffel Van Dorn? Is that why Stoffel Van Dorn sucked? Because he again, another driver who came in 2017. Was he getting that kind of pressure? I mean, he did very well in his one-off appearance in Bahrain in 2016. But when he came into F1, I mean, admittedly, again, the yardstick was a double world champion, Fernando Alonso. So was he getting the pressure as well? Because Van Dorn came in, and people were saying, like, this kid is unreal. Again, I watched his junior career in GP2. The guy absolutely wiped the floor with everybody. And that was a talented field that year. I think Pierre Gasly was racing in that year as well in GP2. So yeah, absolutely unreal. But yeah, terrible management. Just, why would you do that to him? Why would you put that much pressure on him? You need to be as fast as a world champion in their 3rd and 4th season. Not even their debut. I mean, Hamilton was unreal in his first season, but not even trying to make it the first. You're trying to get a guy who's just joined the sport to be as good as a world champion in their 4th season of Formula 1. The guy who's gone on to be the most successful, I mean, they didn't know this at the time, but the guy who's gone on to be the most successful driver in the history of the sport. Hang your head in shame, Eric Boullier and Jonathan Neal. Honestly, you guys are... I don't want to use the word, but you can guess what I'm going to say. But anyway, your thoughts in the comments below. This really does shine a new light on how Kevin Magnussen was, on the whole, a bit average at McLaren. He wasn't amazing, but with the pressure on the guy, I don't blame him. Your thoughts in the comments below, guys. I am absolutely flabbergasted at that. Unbelievable. Hopefully this kind of behaviour has been eliminated now in F1, but looking at Red Bull, probably not.